Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm going to be doing a tutorial and demonstration on how I went about creating a t-shirt design, but this workflow could also be extended to other designs that one might create. Basically I'll be using Photoshop and utilizing the selection tools, threshold, and mask to create a kind of grungy texture effect for this t-shirt design. And so to get started here, I'm just making this image, this Statue of Liberty image, that I'll be juxtaposing with a few other images, black and white, and bumping up the contrast a bit to make the foreground and positive shapes a little easier to extract from the background. So here I've just gone in with the selection tool, the freeform selection tool, or the quick selection tool, and just making my selection here. This kind of job can depend on the contrast of your image, and with the foreground a bit more in affinity or closer to the background, it can take a bit longer, and your selection may have to be a bit more fine-tuned. Such as what's happening right now with the spires on top of the Statue of Liberty's head. Of course, if this was just a picture of a Statue of Liberty with a blank white or black background, this would be a lot easier. It's really only with certain images like this, where there's less contrast with these two, just with the object that you're looking for, that you have to go about this process. So it's just a process of refining the selection, uh, taking certain shapes and using Alt to subtract from your selection and then adding to it. And at a certain point, you can just go in and start erasing if it's a little easier with the eraser tool. Of course, it helps to have a stylus if you're going to do this. I think with digital art generally, it's always good to have a stylus. I think some of the cheapest ones start at about $60 or so and kind of go upwards from there. But I tend to use a Wacom 4 a graphic tablet. It's kind of old. And for other tablets, I also have the Huon, whatever the model is, that I got for about $200. So not terribly expensive, but if you're going to do this kind of stuff, it's definitely good to have a tablet. Makes things a lot easier. So yeah, just continuing to work with the eraser tool and refining these more intricate and laborious shapes, like these spike-like things on top of the Statue of Liberty's head. And sometimes if you need a sharper edge, you can just use the polygon lasso tool there and then erase as needed, which I probably should have done that all along, but it was really just speed over quality at this point, because at the end the edges are going to be a little grungy anyway. It depends on your subject matter. And so at the end I just throw all these shapes together. The other two shapes were extracted in a very similar way, only they were easier because they were just kind of in more more conducive backgrounds to be extracted. Just I think the banana was just against a white backdrop, so it makes it pretty easy at that point to grab your selection tool and just kind of find it pretty easily at that point. And so this is the part where I'm kind of deciding on the composition, playing around with different sizes and rotations and orientations to the object. But of course, first you have to, again, using the polygon selection tool, hitting delete on the keyboard to make that transparent, and then just kind of placing these objects. Of course, the idea is to put the Statue of Liberty in the banana. The title for the piece is Freedom Banana. It's kind of a silly idea that I had. Thought it might be kind of interesting just to take these very different and disparate objects and to just put them together. I think wasps attack bananas. I'm not exactly sure. It's never happened to me before, but Seems like something that could happen. Yeah, it's just a silly design, but I thought I could create some interesting effects with it, and it seemed like a good subject matter to kind of demonstrate these various tools in my workflow. So I'm continuing to size and shape these objects to try to get something presentable to the best effect that I can achieve. I really didn't have a preliminary sketch, or I didn't really create composition thumbnails, which I probably should have done. And what you should do, if you have time to do it, I would definitely recommend it. But I kind of had a decent idea of where I wanted to go with this piece. So I just dove right in and eventually, with not too much work, I got something acceptable looking. Okay, so some final adjustments here. It's good to zoom out of your canvas from time to time just to see what the image looks like from far away, and sometimes even it's good to squint your eyes to kind of pick out the more popping, contrasting shapes, and you get a better sense of the silhouette as it lets you kind of mask all of the details and other things. But so at this point, I skipped ahead a little as I had some trouble with the recording, but I'm going to demonstrate what I did with the banana. Basically, I just desaturated the image with the hue and saturation. And now I'm exhibiting a tool that I like to use a lot. If I could select it correctly, it is the threshold tool. It's similar to Illustrator's image trace tool, only it's done with raster pixels, which if you have a high enough resolution image, it just makes it easier than having to go to Illustrator. You can just do it here, and it basically does the same thing. It just creates a kind of posterized, very illustrative kind of effect to your image that you can more easily manipulate and change the color of it so that it's not representational of its actual image that you're using. Just to put a more graphic and more subjective slant on it. But that's the tool I'm using here, and I will be doing the same thing with the Statue of Liberty. The same thing I did with the wasp, but that I changed the color on to blue earlier. And yeah, same thing there, just to make them all the same color. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing here. Again, just desaturating the image and going, okay, so it's desaturated, then going to threshold once again, playing with the slider there, just to try to find an interesting range of values. It just kind of creates this exacerbated or very kind of chiaroscuro display of values and displacing it from the native image that you can then manipulate easily with just one color, essentially for your shadow shapes. Of course, which I then fill blue after going to the select color range and then just clicking on whatever color happens to be there. In my case, it was black, which is what I want to select here. Sometimes the color range tool is a little finicky. You have to kind of play around with it, but when you basically just go to selection, color range, you select the color that you're looking for, that you want to change. That's what you want your selection to be. Of course, here I had some extra junk that I really didn't want there, so I had to do a little extra work that I didn't accomplish in the initial phase when I was extracting this image using the selection tools. So now I have to kind of fix that. Just kind of do some trial and error to get the result that I'm looking for. The same process I did with the other objects. It's just the Statue of Liberty is kind of a problem image in a certain sense. It takes a little more work. So once again, I'm painting away certain areas just like I did before with the eraser tool when extracting the image. Just doing it by hand to get a rough representation of what I'm looking for. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, it can be if you spend a lot of time on it, but with this illustration, it really doesn't. It just kind of depends on your subject matter. Because this one's going to be kind of grungy anyway, as you will see at the end when it's finished. If art ever is finished. Mine really isn't. I just kind of get it to a point where it's kind of satisfactory, but you know, with t-shirt designs, you can't just work on it forever. The quantity of designs is certainly important, but you want to do the best that you can within the limited time that's available to you. And so at any rate, in one way or another, I finally get the color in there just by going to Edit, Color Fill with whatever color you happen to have selected in your color palette. And so at this point, I'm using the spoon graphics method, I believe, to create some grunge to this image. Just alt selecting the mask that I created, pasting in the grunge image that was copied, just playing around with the contrast to make it pop a little more, inverting the image, which you often have to do, just inverting the image there. This is just to create some grunginess, some pixelated wear and tear to the image, which I like to do with a lot of my designs. Just go back and click on the actual design, and now you can see that it's nice and worn and weathered. Nice bit of a grungy texture there. Just to add some interest and just something a bit over the top. And I'm doing the other method here, just clicking on Distort, Ripple. I'm playing around with the settings a bit to get kind of a frayed edge. Of course, you can definitely go overboard with this tool. If that's if that's the effect you're going for. But I wanted something a little more subtle, so I just didn't take it out too far. This is all just to create a kind of a stamp, kind of unity and spontaneity to the edges, as though it might have come out of a singular stamp or something like that, just to make it organic and not so digital looking, a little more aesthetically appealing. Okay, so at this phase, it's mostly done. I'm just now playing around with different styles, different color styles with a bit of additional color overlay. I mean, there's so many different combinations you could do at this point. I thought kind of a maroon, darkish red would look good as well. And so I just started playing around to experiment with some different color effects. Just with a texture stamp brush. I mean, you can find these online, but perhaps if enough people ask, I will point out some more direct references to those. But if you just do a search for grunge stamp texture brushes for Photoshop, they'll come up pretty easily. That's all that I'm using here to create some blue color overlays in kind of an abstract, grungy kind of way, just kind of experimenting further, which I think this is the fun part. The other stuff is just kind of technical, particularly extracting the images. But this part, you can really kind of feel it out and have some happy accidents perhaps, just kind of playing around and sandboxing it to see what kind of effects you can come up with. And with a design like this, there are really no hard and fast rules. Just kind of play around, and then in the end I got something like this. And that's basically it. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.